And every day, I practice martial arts.
But I remember when I first moved to Hong Kong, hanging out with Matty J, Zebra Pan, who was one of the core stunt group who worked with Bruce Lee in the films that he made when he came back to Hong Kong. And he told me, we were talking about, on the first two films, The Big Boss and Fist of Fury, the action director of credit is Han Jie. But obviously, the action in the movies is almost entirely, particularly on Fist of Fury, that of Bruce Lee. And Zebra told me when they first did the big dojo fight in Fist of Fury, this was the first time. And I said, so how was it? Did Bruce Lee kind of banish, Han Jie and Lo away from the set and just take over because he was now this big star after The Big Boss? And he says, no, actually, he's hung back. Bruce is like portrayed in, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And contrary maybe to the image of him as this quite harsh person, what I admire about Bruce, he would be sharp and angry upwards to the bosses, to the investors, to other stars. And he would be gentle going down. But a lot of these guys you see today is the wrong direction. And Bruce was the opposite. So he was respectful to everybody, but he also had a good way of dealing with somebody of the tradition. And of course, his father, Lei Chun, had known Han Jie very well in the opera days.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was a very tight circle.
Okay.
I mean, you had like Yu Jim-yun, who was Jackie Chan's teacher. You had like Lei Chun. You had people like Han Jie. Everybody was in the opera world and knew each other very well. Yun Siu-tien, the father of Yin Wo-ping.
Right.
And so it was very interesting to hear the story of Bruce kind of gently pushing, Uncle Han to the side. And then, in the words of Zebra Pan, he started to do Bruce Lee, which I'm thinking, and he said it was like really in Chinese, Da Huinan guy, everybody was, oh my God. Because then he came out and I'm going to kick this guy, I'm going to kick this guy, and the top shot of everybody doing their thing. And then, the camera on a dolly and boom, all the stuff he does in that scene. And then he pulls out the nunchucks and bam, 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 bam. But he led into it by slowly saying, maybe we could try this, maybe we could try that. And then that was the first scene that he said that you really started to see him doing Bruce Lee.
Wow, that's interesting because we often hear the stories about Bruce Lee being somewhat cocky.
Right.
What I like is that you gave it a little bit of context. It was about who he was being cocky to, I suppose, because we also hear all the stories about him fighting for the stuntmen to get better meals on Enter the Dragon. And when I would hear, it was always kind of perceived that you had Han Yin-che was the choreographer for Big Boss, and he also is the Big Boss.
Yeah.
And then in the second movie, he gets kind of pushed aside, and it makes it, the feeling is that was always somewhat acrimonious, but you see photos of Bruce Lee cutting Han Yin-che's hair, and it always seemed like, actually, they always seemed kind of close to each other.
He knew how to do it, and the way it was divided on the film is if you look at the fights in the film that don't include Bruce, they're very much old school. And so like Han Zifu had complete control over that.
The fight when the Japanese come to Jingwu, where
all
Bruce
of
Lee's
that
not
is
there
like
yet.
old school stuff.
Yes.
And then you look at Bruce's stuff is very Bruce Lee, as Matty J was saying. So I think that's a misapprehension, the idea of Bruce being this very harsh. And I mean, I think, and I would say this is something that's true of you and a lot of the people I know, is like, to me, martial arts is limiting if you only use it in the Mogun or the dojo. Martial strategy should be, the bingfa should be used in daily life. And I often look at somebody who's making their life work, and not saying that we don't all make mistakes, not saying that we don't have catastrophes, but then in some ways you define somebody much like you can learn a lot when somebody comes back from a loss in a fight. What do they learn? And also you learn a lot from somebody coming back from a difficult situation. What do they learn? How do they survive and grow? But martial arts useful for that. And people ask me, it's like, well, what's the use of Kung Fu if you're not doing MMA, if you're not fighting off people in the street? And I go, no, but it's because you're living it every day.
Yeah.
And I think Bruce, there's been a little bit, for my taste, this desire to reposition Bruce Lee as kind of a new age hippie guru, like a Kung Fu Deepak Chopra.
Right.
I think that's going a bit far.
Absolutely.
But within the context of what he was doing, he knew how to play and how to kind of use what particular manifestation of himself, wrathful or playful to get what he needed. And he was confrontational, and he could be very confrontational with the bosses. And, you know, there's stories about Raymond Chow, and then later he confronted Lawway. But in those cases, I think it was less, he lost control as much as he felt that in the time disrespected or cheated. And so he wanted to assert himself in that way. But, and it's interesting, you talk about, people always talk about Bruce Lee as a real fighter. In the context of the late 60s and early 70s, what was a real fighter? We didn't have MMA cage matches. You had undocumented street fights in Hong Kong and elsewhere.
Right.
To me, if you look at the stuntmen at that time, many of them were like part-time gangsters, full-time stuntmen, or full-time stuntmen, part-time gangsters, or whatever. There was this kind of intersection between the martial arts.
Word is, I'm a kung fu genius.